With Chewy's doors painted, I've dropped them back on the ground and pushed them forward. I have the doors stored away, and the remaining removable panels, I have a bit of space to work on them now, just inside the door of the garage. I have the wings hung up, I have the boot over there, and the bonnet's here on some tyres where I'll be able to do some work on the underside of it. I'm going to use the wire cut brush to clean up some surface rust on the inside and top side of the bonnet. I want to get them down to bare metal before I put any paint on it so that they don't rust again. So I have some reinforcements here, new brush, and very handy for the grinder, some earplugs.
I had a few more bits to remove from the bonnet before I could use any abrasives on it. These neat little deflectors. There was an old sticker here. This bonnet must have come off of petrol because it's a reminder about spark plugs, and that's not really relevant to Chewy. There's one fairly nasty bit of surface rust, but I cleared that down to shiny metal with the nice new brush. A lot of the rust areas on this car were along where rubber seals held moisture, along that strip on the back, and there's also a little bit here around the bonnet catch mechanism. So blew off the dust, the airline, and then I started cleaning up these little stone chips that have led to spot rust, and they were actually bigger under the paint. They'd actually expanded along a little bit below it, so I really had to grind deep to get them off. So I used the palm sander then to get them down as smooth as I could and to prepare the paint that's remaining on the panel. I blew all that off so I could see what I was doing. I found a few bits that needed more sanding, and also I wanted to go along the edges to get rid of any little chips in the paint there. There's a little surface rust on the wings down where they're bolted on at the A-pillar. And there's a few scars here. Again, did the edges, and that's the advantage to having them off the car. Wouldn't have been able to do this with them fixed on it. I used the tack cloth to remove dust that the airline didn't remove. Then I got my degreaser to really clean the surfaces. That looks like something from 101 Dalmatians. I had a new primer to try from motorcolor.ie. It's a Profix CP375 Swift primer. You mix it up with its own hardener, CP216, and it gets 25 of that to 100 parts primer, and it uses 10 parts of the usual thinner CP040. It has much faster drying properties than the ones I've used previously. I gave all the panels a light dust coat to get started. I was also doing the underside of the bonnet. I followed that with a proper first coat, which already started to disappear the spots. I mixed up another little batch for a second coat. I came back and gave that a third coat as well, as I needed a good build over those depressions where the stone chips were. I've been asked to give a bit more detail about how I'm cleaning after using the gun, but I actually said I don't really feel qualified to do this yet, and really I'm not, because that lid that I'm putting on there, it needed a bit more of a clean, and actually the intake to the paint cup was blocked when I started painting later. Meanwhile, the new primer was very nice to sand down. It almost felt like filler. So I went over it very gently with 800 grit paper to get a nice smooth finish. I decided to just do the wings by hand because they've so many curved surfaces that the flat sander would probably just go through. I blew off as much of the dust as I could with the airline. That of course is followed up by brushing down the floor and airing the place for a while. Then I went back in and degreased everything. So poured some paint for these front panels. About 300 ml of paint, 150 ml of hardener, and about 50 ml of thinners. Makes up a nice 500 ml batch. So this is where I noticed that the paint wasn't coming out of the gun properly, but I went through all sorts of solutions to try and figure it out, which involved emptying the cup, stirring the paint again, blowing air through all parts of the gun, running some extra thinners through it. With all this and the paint being out of the pot for quite a long time, it was pretty good that the paint was coming out at all by the time I got going. Luckily this paint has a 90-minute pot life. Of course I had everything turned up to the max, so I'm probably delivering a little bit too much paint in this coat. But it's all going down to experience, and I think this time I'm actually getting a better coat than I did on the doors. So after this is sanded down and I do a final top coat, I think I'll get a good result. Turning the nozzle here so that it goes horizontally, which is ideal for doing these wings the way they're suspended. A little bit thinner then for the second coat, trying to pull back from the thickness of the first one. I'd come back and give all the panels a third coat, as I had plenty of paint in the gun.
They've been drying overnight, and I'm still pretty pleased with how well they turned out despite my lack of vigilance in cleaning out my paint pot. The next bit of painting is going to be really exciting because that's going to bring everything up to the same stage and really going to see how Chewy's going to turn out.